The meeting ended faster than I expected. No discussion, no debate, just a short sentence and a polite smile that didn't reach anyone's eyes. My name was removed from the project I had built from nothing, the one I stayed late for, the one I believed would change my life. They spoke as if I wasn't even in the room. When I tried to say something, the manager checked his watch and said they were out of time. I stood up, confused, still holding my notebook. When I reached the door, my badge stopped working. I tried again, red light. Security avoided my eyes as they let me out manually. People I had worked beside for years stared at their screens. No one said goodbye. No one explained. As I walked out, I realized something important had broken. Not just my career, my trust. And I knew nothing would ever be the same again. It didn't take long to see my work again. It was everywhere. The same ideas, the same structure, the same vision I had shared in private meetings. Only now, other names were attached to it. People who barely showed up suddenly became leaders. I watched a company interview online, and there they were, smiling, confident, talking about their journey. They used my words almost exactly. I recognized every sentence. Friends sent me links, asking if I had seen it. I didn't reply. I felt sick, but I stayed quiet. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to expose everything. But I knew how these stories end. The loud one looks bitter. The quiet one disappears. So I chose silence. I watched them celebrate promotions, bonuses, praise. They spoke about teamwork while standing on my effort. Every smile they gave the camera felt like a reminder. They had taken my credit, and the world was applauding them for it. The rumors came next. They always do. Someone said I was difficult. Someone else said I missed deadlines. Soon the story grew bigger than me. Online posts hinted that I couldn't handle pressure. Old colleagues stopped responding to messages. Opportunities disappeared without explanation. No one asked for my side. No one checked facts. Silence became my reputation. I learned something painful during that time. Truth doesn't matter when you're not in the room. I wanted to defend myself, to correct the lies, to explain what really happened. But every time I imagined speaking out, I saw how it would be twisted, how they would smile calmly while I looked emotional. So I swallowed my words. The silence hurt more than the lies because it felt like agreeing with them. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the part of the story where the noise fades and something else begins to grow quietly. I remember sitting in my car long after everyone else had left. The parking lot was almost empty. The sky was dark, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't turn on the engine. I just stared at the dashboard like it might explain what had happened. My phone kept buzzing. Rejection emails, missed calls I didn't have the strength to answer, messages from people pretending to care but really just curious. I felt embarrassed, angry, scared, and tired all at once. I thought about my bills, about the people who believed in me, about how fast everything had disappeared. That was rock bottom. Not the loss of the job, but the feeling that I didn't matter anymore. I sat there for nearly an hour, breathing slowly, trying not to cry. At some point, I realized no one was coming to save me. And strangely, that realization hurt, but it also woke something up inside me. That night, I opened my phone and started typing. Long messages, honest messages, angry messages. I wrote emails explaining everything. I wrote posts exposing names and dates and proof. I imagined how good it would feel to finally be heard, to finally fight back. My fingers moved fast, fueled by pain. Then I stopped. I read everything again. I imagined how it would look from the outside. A fallen employee blaming others. A bitter voice shouting into the noise. I deleted one message, then another, then all of them. Anger wanted a voice, but wisdom asked for patience. I chose silence, not because I was weak, but because I was learning. Learning how power really works. Learning that timing matters more than truth. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't explain myself. I wouldn't beg. I'd stay quiet and let time do what words never could. From a distance, I watched them rise. Promotions came fast for them, almost too fast. New titles, bigger offices with glass walls and better views. Their names appeared in company emails, praised for vision and leadership. I recognized that vision. It was mine. I heard coworkers talk about how lucky they were, how deserved their success was. I said nothing. I learned to keep my face calm while my chest tightened. Sometimes I would see photos online, smiles, celebrations, awards. They looked confident, untouchable. They believed I was finished, that I had disappeared for good. And in a way, I let them believe it. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't remind people of my role. I stayed invisible on purpose. Watching them win was painful, but it also taught me something important. When people think you're gone, they stop guarding themselves. They grow careless. And while they were enjoying the spotlight, I was quietly paying attention, learning how the game was really played. With nothing to distract me, I replayed everything in my mind. Every meeting, every conversation, every moment I ignored my instincts. I saw where I trusted too much. I believed loyalty worked both ways. I believed effort would protect me. I saw where I stayed soft, where I chose peace over clarity, where I avoided difficult questions. I didn't blame myself, but I didn't lie to myself either. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about understanding. I studied how people moved when power was involved, how smiles changed behind closed doors, how silence could be used against you. I learned without bitterness because bitterness would slow me down. Instead, I treated my failure like a lesson that cost me everything, and that made it valuable. I promised myself I wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. I wouldn't confuse kindness with safety again. This was the chapter where I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started celebrating. My new job was nothing impressive. Small office, old computers, low pay that barely covered my expenses. I worked long nights and early mornings, doing tasks far below my skill level. No one there knew who I used to be. No one cared. And honestly, that helped. There were no expectations to meet, no image to protect. I could make mistakes quietly and learn fast. Some days, I felt embarrassed starting over like this. Other days, I felt free. I listened more than I talked. I watched how things worked from the ground up. I learned patience again. Hard, honest patience. While others rushed for recognition, I focused on getting better, stronger, sharper. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Every late night rebuilt something inside me that had been broken. I stopped chasing titles and started rebuilding my foundation. Starting small wasn't a step backward. It was the beginning of something more solid than anything I had before. I stopped explaining myself to people who already believed a version of me that wasn't true. I stopped proving my worth in rooms that had already made their decision. Instead, I listened. I watched how people spoke when they thought no one important was paying attention. I noticed patterns, weaknesses, habits. Silence gave me space to think clearly. People began to underestimate me, and I let them. They spoke freely around me. They assumed I had nothing left to offer, and that was powerful. Silence became my shield and my weapon at the same time. I learned when to speak and when to stay quiet, when to move and when to wait. For the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was choosing. Every quiet moment sharpened my focus. I didn't need validation anymore. I didn't need to be seen. I needed to be ready. And while others filled the room with noise, I prepared in silence, knowing that underestimation is one of the greatest advantages a person can have. While the world slept, I worked. I learned new skills that couldn't be taken from me, skills that didn't depend on titles or approval. I built habits that made me disciplined even when no one was watching. Early mornings, late nights, consistent effort, no announcements, no posts, no updates. I didn't tell people what I was working on. I didn't need encouragement. I needed results. Slowly, I became sharper than I had ever been, more focused, more patient. I studied strategy, communication, leadership, and restraint. I learned how systems fail and how people hide mistakes. I practiced staying calm under pressure. Building quietly meant I could grow without interference. No one tried to stop me because no one knew what I was becoming. This chapter wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was crucial. While they enjoyed the rewards of yesterday's work, I was preparing for a future they didn't see coming, and that made all the difference. Over time, my name stopped coming up in conversations. At first, it stung more than I expected. Being forgotten felt like being erased, but slowly, I understood the gift hidden inside that silence. I became a ghost in the system. No one watched my moves. No one questioned my decisions. I wasn't compared to anyone. That freedom changed everything. I worked without pressure or fear of judgment. I could experiment, fail quietly, and improve without an audience. While others chased attention, I chased precision. Days felt longer, but also lighter. I didn't have to defend myself or explain my past. I was just another worker in the background, and that was perfect. In that quiet space, I rebuilt confidence the right way. Not from praise, but from progress. Being forgotten didn't mean I was finished. It meant I was finally free to grow without limits or distractions. The first real win didn't come with applause or celebration. A client reached out after seeing my work through someone else. They didn't care about my past. They cared about results. After a short meeting, they chose me over them. The same people who once took credit for my work. There was no drama, no public announcement, no revenge smile, just a signed agreement and a clear goal. I delivered exactly what I promised. On time, clean, professional. When the project succeeded, the client returned for more. That moment mattered more than any promotion I ever lost. It wasn't about beating them. It was about proving to myself that my skills still worked, that I wasn't broken. I didn't celebrate loudly. I quietly saved the payment, updated my notes, and moved forward. The first win didn't change my life overnight, but it changed my belief. And that was enough to keep going. One project became three. Three became 10. The growth wasn't explosive, but it was steady, reliable. Every client led to another referral. Every result built trust. I stayed quiet and focused, still invisible to the people who once controlled the room. I worked longer hours, but with purpose this time. There was no chaos, no rushing for attention, just consistent progress. I built systems that allowed me to handle more without burning out. I learned when to say no and when to lean in. Momentum felt different than success. It was calmer, stronger. It didn't need validation. I avoided posting wins or telling my story, not because I was afraid, but because I was building something that needed time. While they enjoyed recognition, I enjoyed stability. Each completed project stacked on the last, like bricks forming something solid. Momentum wasn't loud, but it was unstoppable. Eventually, something shifted on their side. Numbers dropped. Clients stopped renewing contracts. Long-term partners quietly walked away. Meetings became tense. Questions started rising, but answers didn't come easily. They noticed something was wrong, even if they didn't understand why. I heard pieces of it through shared contacts and old connections. They started watching the market more closely, watching me without realizing it was me. They still didn't say my name. Pride wouldn't allow them. They felt the pressure. The confidence they once showed in interviews faded. Smiles looked forced. They were reacting now while I was moving with intention. I didn't rush to reveal myself. I stayed where I was, delivering work, building trust, letting time apply pressure naturally. Watching them struggle wasn't satisfying in the way revenge stories promise. It was quiet, almost sad, but it confirmed something important. The foundation they built on lies was finally starting to crack. Truth doesn't rush, it waits. Old emails resurfaced during audits and internal reviews. Receipts existed where they thought none did. Messages they forgot about, documents they assumed were deleted. The lies they told years ago began to conflict with recorded facts. Small inconsistencies became serious problems. People started asking questions they could no longer dodge. I didn't push anything forward. I didn't leak information. Time did the work on its own. The truth surfaced naturally without emotion or drama. That made it impossible to ignore. Conversations changed tone. Trust eroded quickly. I watched from a distance as the story shifted. The same people who once defended them now kept quiet. The silence moved to the other side. Old lies cracked, not because someone attacked them, but because lies can't age well. They break under their own weight. And when they do, there's nothing left to hide behind. By the time things started falling apart for them, I was already prepared. I didn't rush or feel excited. I had spent too much time building myself quietly to be careless now. I reviewed my work carefully, double-checked records, and kept everything clean. I knew the truth had a way of surfacing, but only if you didn't interfere with it. Emotion had no place here. I stayed calm, focused, and patient. While others panicked, I moved with intention. I didn't need revenge. I needed clarity. Every late night, every quiet lesson, every small win had led to this moment. I wasn't hoping for their downfall. I was ready for the moment when I would no longer need to hide. Preparation gave me confidence that didn't shake when pressure came. I understood the systems now. I understood people. Most importantly, I understood myself. Whatever happened next, I knew I could handle it. And that calm readiness was something no one could take away from me. The invitation came without drama. A simple message, a scheduled meeting, my name listed among others I hadn't seen in years. When I walked into the room, conversations slowed. Some faces showed confusion. Others showed recognition they weren't ready to admit. I stayed calm and professional. No anger, no attitude, just focus. I listened more than I spoke at first. I answered questions clearly, without emotion. When it was my turn, I didn't attack anyone. I presented facts, timelines, documents, work history. Everything was clean and easy to verify. The room felt different as I spoke. The confidence shifted. People leaned forward. Some avoided eye contact. I wasn't there to embarrass anyone. I was there to tell the truth clearly and quietly. This wasn't a confrontation, it was a correction. And for the first time since everything broke, I felt seen, not as a victim, but as someone in control of their story. As the discussion continued, the energy in the room changed completely. People stopped interrupting. Notes were taken carefully. Questions became more precise. The stories they had repeated for years didn't line up anymore. Small contradictions turned into big problems. I stayed calm through it all. No raised voice, no emotional appeal, just facts placed gently on the table. The truth didn't need force. It carried its own weight. I could see it on their faces. The confidence that once filled the room had faded. Some tried to explain, others stayed silent. The balance had shifted, and everyone felt it. I realized something important in that moment. Power isn't loud, it's steady. The room wasn't reacting to me, it was reacting to clarity. When confusion disappears, reality takes over. I didn't enjoy watching them struggle. I simply observed. This wasn't about winning an argument, it was about restoring truth where lies had lived for too long. When pressure increased, masks began to fall. People spoke differently when they realized they could no longer control the narrative. Excuses sounded weak. Confidence cracked. Some tried to distance themselves. Others shifted blame. The unity they once showed broke apart quickly. I watched quietly as relationships strained and trust disappeared. The same people who once stood together now avoided responsibility. It was uncomfortable to witness, but necessary. Lies survive in silence, but collapse under light. I didn't say much during this part. I didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. Decisions were made, investigations followed, consequences became unavoidable. I felt no satisfaction, only closure. The masks fell not because I pulled them off, but because they could no longer be held up. That difference mattered. I wasn't seen as someone seeking revenge. I was seen as someone who stayed patient until reality caught up, and that changed how people looked at me forever. The consequences became public faster than anyone expected. Resignations were announced quietly at first, then more followed. Press statements were careful and vague, but the message was clear. Trust had been broken. Leadership had failed. The same media that once praised them now spoke cautiously. Apologies came late, stripped of confidence. I stayed out of it. I didn't give interviews. I didn't share my story online. I didn't need to. The truth was already visible. People reached out privately, some apologizing, others asking how I stayed so calm. I didn't respond to most of them. This chapter wasn't about recognition. It was about resolution. Watching consequences unfold didn't bring joy. It brought peace. The weight I had carried for so long finally lifted. The story no longer belonged to them. And for the first time since everything broke, I felt free. Not because they fell, but because I had risen without losing myself. When everything became official, people expected a reaction from me, a statement, a smile, a victory moment. But I didn't celebrate. There was no urge to post online or explain how right I had been all along. Celebration would have meant I was still tied to the past. Instead, I felt quiet relief. The pressure that had lived in my chest for years finally faded. I went back to my routine the next morning like nothing had changed. Coffee, work, focus. I understood that winning loudly often leads to losing later. I didn't need applause to validate my journey. What mattered was that I stayed true to myself when it was hardest. I had learned restraint, patience, and control. Those lessons were worth more than any public praise. Celebration would have made the story about them again. Silence kept it about growth. and that silence felt stronger than any victory speech ever could. I didn't take their old seat. I didn't want it. That space carried too much history, too many broken promises. Instead, I created something new, a role built on clarity, accountability, and respect. I set my own rules. I chose the people carefully. There were no shortcuts this time, no confusion about credit or responsibility. I made sure everyone was seen and valued. Work felt different now, lighter, more honest. I wasn't chasing power anymore. I was building stability. People noticed the difference quickly. Trust came easily when transparency led the way. I didn't talk about the past unless asked. I didn't need to. My work spoke clearly. Every decision felt intentional. This wasn't a comeback. It was a correction, a quiet one. I finally had the space to lead without fear, without compromise. And for the first time, my success didn't depend on anyone else falling. Over time, people began to ask questions. How did you survive that? How did you stay calm? How did you come back without fighting publicly? I never gave long answers. I smiled and said I stayed quiet and kept working. That was the truth. Silence gave me room to think, to grow, to heal. I explained that not every battle needs noise. Some victories require patience. People listen differently now, not because of my story, but because of my presence. I carried myself with calm confidence that didn't ask for approval. That spoke louder than any explanation. I learned that strength doesn't always show itself in confrontation. Sometimes it shows in restraint, in knowing when to wait, when to move, when to let time speak. Those who understood that lesson stayed close. Those who didn't faded away. And I was fine with that. My life was no longer about proving anything to anyone. One evening, I drove past the old building, the one that once held my future. The lights were off. The sign had been removed. The place looked smaller than I remembered. I sat in my car for a moment, not out of anger, but reflection. I thought about the person I used to be, eager, trusting, unprepared for how things really worked. I didn't regret those years. They shaped me. They taught me lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. I didn't go inside. I didn't take pictures. I didn't need closure from a place that no longer mattered. I started the engine and drove away. Looking back once was enough. I had nothing to prove there anymore. The past no longer defined me. It had served its purpose, and leaving it behind felt lighter than holding on to it ever had. They thought silence meant weakness. They believed if I didn't speak, I didn't matter. They were wrong. Silence was preparation. It was discipline. It was control. While they enjoyed winning loudly, I learned quietly. While they built on attention, I built on truth. In the end, the story didn't belong to them. It belonged to patience, to resilience, to growth done in the dark. I didn't rise by stepping on anyone. I rose by staying focused when it was easier to break. The ending wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was solid. I stood exactly where I was meant to be, stronger than before, untouched by bitterness. They faded into a chapter I no longer needed to read. I moved forward with clarity and calm. I stayed quiet while they won. And when the ending arrived, it wasn't written for them. It was written for me.